The 26th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure is hereby reconvened. I would like to welcome a delegation from the Ministry to this public hearing of the Joint Select Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure pursuant to an inquiry into the establishment of systems for the maintenance of drainage on roadways. I take this opportunity to remind members and officials to turn off their cell phones, and I do so with mine. They say to lead by example is the best thing. Well, I've had enough experiences. I've learned that lesson. Right. This hearing, of course, is being broadcast live on the Parliament channel, Channel 11, and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. A warm welcome to members of the viewing and listening public, and you can, of course, send in your comments via email at parl101 on parliament.org, or on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ttparliament, or on Twitter at ttparliament. Again, welcome to the representatives of the Ministry of Works and Transport, and I would be grateful if you would introduce yourselves.
Hello, good morning, Chair. I am Sonia Francis-Yearwood, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Works and Transport.
Good morning. I am Dahanmati Ramdat, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Work and Transport.
Morning. I am Parasram Ramlogan, the Acting Chief Technical Officer of the Ministry of Works and Transport.
Good morning. I am Candice Gilbernard, Manager of the Coastal Protection Unit.
Good morning. I am Paula Weber, Director of Drainage.
Morning, Chair. My name is Navin Ramsingh. I'm the Acting Director of Highways.
Good morning. My name is Hayden Phillip, Program Director, Pure Program.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Marvin Gonzalez. I'm the Director of Legal.
And of course, I'm Senator Stephen Crease, the chair of this committee. I now invite members of my committee to introduce themselves to you, starting on my far right.
Good morning, all. I'm Glenda Jennings-Smith, member.
Good morning, all again. I am a Nigel De Freitas, member.
Morning, everyone. Lovell Francis, member.
Morning, Darrell Smith, member.
Good morning, Rushton Parry, Vice Chairman.
All right. The people in the second row, I take it, are from your ministry as well? Yeah. We'd like to meet them too.
Good morning. I'm Kerry Shepard, Chief Engineer, Maintenance and Construction of the Drainage Division.
Good morning. I am Rabindranath Jogi, Director of Mechanical Services, Ministry of Works.
Hi, good morning. Mahadev Jagdev, Manager of the Bridges, Landslips and Traffic Management Program.
Good morning. My name is Adande Pigot, Traffic Engineer, Traffic Management Branch.
Okay, thank you. I think we got everybody now? All right. The basic objectives of this inquiry are as follows: to examine the current systems in place for the maintenance of drainage and roadways, to examine the programs and initiatives geared towards the maintenance of drainage and roadways in order to determine whether they are adequate and effective, and to determine the challenges associated with the maintenance of drainage and roadways. I would like to, at this time, to acknowledge receipt of the written submissions from the Ministry of Works and Transport dated March the 5th. Good. And I would now like to afford the Permanent Secretary an opportunity to make some brief opening remarks.
Once again, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members. The team from the Ministry of Works and Transport would like to thank you for the invitation to attend today's committee sitting, looking into the establishment of systems for the maintenance of drainage and roadways. In some ways, given the remit of this Joint Select Committee in terms of land and physical infrastructure, the Ministry of Works and Transport almost sees this committee as our committee, given our remit. By way of background, the Ministry of Works and Transport had its genesis in 1958 and was a successor organization to the Works and Hydraulics Department. The ministry is responsible for providing public infrastructure and transportation for the social and economic development of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. In this context, we aim to effectively provide and maintain safe sea, air, and land infrastructure for the improvement of the quality of life of the citizens. Our core functions run a gamut, and we take from the Gazette number 97 of 2015, which indicates that our responsible areas include coastal erosion, drainage, bridges, civil aviation, construction, mechanical services, roads and highways, traffic management, air services agreements, harbors, maritime services, motor vehicle registration and control, ports including airports, public transport, unemployment relief program, and the program for upgrading roads efficiency. We also have 2 wholly owned enterprises, 2 majority owned enterprises, and 5 statutory boards under our purview. At today's sitting, the ministry has been requested to provide information to assist the committee in terms of the areas previously identified, which includes examination of the current systems in place for the maintenance of drainage and roadways, examination of the programs and initiatives geared towards maintenance of drainage and roadways, and identification of some of the challenges. We have provided a written submission based on the questions submitted, and we also stand ready, the team that is here today, to provide any further information as may be required.
Hi, good morning, Chairman, morning viewers, listeners. I've worked with a number of faces here with regards to drainage in 2 capacities as Member of Parliament for Diego Martin Central, but as Chairman of the Diego Martin Regional Corporation. As you know, Diego Martin, for a period of time, and I know my colleague, Mr. Francis here, in his constituency as well, more recently, have been severely hit with flooding. It's kind of quiet down in Diego Martin region, not just Diego Martin Central. But since I was chairman, I've been asking, and we always see all these elaborate plans and a lot of money being spent on these plans and surveys and statistics and data. One in particular comes to mind, the plan for downtown Port of Spain, as you know, by City Gate there. And I don't want to name the company's name, but I know a significant sum of money was spent over several years on a drainage plan for that area. I don't know what is a few questions in it, but the main one, has that type of plan been done in other areas in terms of that? Because one of the issues that we had in Diego Martin, and I'm sure the other MPs and people listening and watching will attest to, is the growth of the populations in a number of these areas. A case in point in Diego Martin, the number of residents have expanded significantly, yet we have the same drainage system that is there. So the question is, that kind of study, has it been done? Has there ever been a time that a study has been done and implemented? Because it seems to be that we do these studies, millions, hundreds of millions of dollars are spent, and it isn't implemented. And the second part of the question is, in terms of the squatters, because in Diego Martin and a number of the areas as well, where the people start off as squatters, which is they do their own infrastructure, and then afterwards, when they get regularized, you all, sadly to say, and I really, really feel it for you all, have to go in there and assist with retaining walls and to fix the draining issues. But is there, even in your data and planning, is squatters and how we deal with that part of those plans moving forward?
Chair? If I'm correct, the first question related to the studies. And over the years, we have been undertaking a number of studies. The latest one is a comprehensive national drainage development study, where we sought to seek to address Trinidad in all the different sectors. We are quite away with that study. We have results for most of the sectors. The one that is outstanding, unfortunately, is the Northwest Peninsula. That is the next study that is to come on. We have completed the terms of reference, and it is expected that that should go to tender by the second quarter. The second part of the question, it spoke to implementation. And once we get the results of the studies, the programs are included then under our development program in the most cases. There are instances, and we have been finding this, and we can probably share with the committee in more detail in writing, where the recommendations of the studies may result in considerable social upheaval, because there are some areas, and I will let our Director of Drainage go further into it if you would like, where communities have been built and developments are being built in areas that are natural floodplains, and the recommendations may speak to moving whole communities. That has another connotation to it that we have to deal with. So implementation in the main, where we take the results of the studies and we factor it into our development program, our public and sector investment program, and we can give you the details of each project that we have on the way. We can provide that for you as well.
Okay, and the squatting part of it, would you?
The interesting thing is, when we were preparing for the Joint Select, there was a statement that had been made recently, is that in the public sector, we have no simple problems. We are all interconnected. In terms of the squatting part of it, the ministry seeks to work with the other agencies with responsibility for squatter regularization, and we would give advice, we would work with LSA as well, and as possible, because a lot of times the squatting may not be within our direct jurisdiction, but we still seek to give technical advice where we can in terms of regularizing the area.
Morning, PS and team. I just want to probably broaden back the conversation a bit rather than going into some specifics as where Member Smith went into. Now, the purpose of this JSC is to look specifically at issues surrounding our roadways and drainage in its current state as it is. Now, I have read in quite a bit of detail your submission, and I must say that the submission was very well put together. There is tons of information in terms of technical specification, modern methods at which your ministry is approaching both areas. It's a wealth of information, the amount of money that we spent over the last 5 or 6 years. So the two broad questions that I want to throw at your entire team, in terms of drainage, 2017, and both Member Francis and I were tossed in the middle of 3 massive floods last year, especially in South Trinidad. So the first question in terms of the drainage, what would account for the regularity and the severity of flooding that we saw in 2017, and we are bracing for perhaps a similar occurrence this year if there is no change to something which I don't know of, which you may be able to tell us? And 2, from the road perspective, we've seen in terms of your report the amount of expenditure that has been spent on roads over the last 5 or 6 years. I have seen the technology that you all are employing in terms of a lot of the rehabilitation projects. Now, the question that I want to ask, another broad one, why in 2018 on social media we are seeing citizens of this country planting banana trees in potholes? We are seeing, as a matter of fact, of this morning, there's a gentleman who fell into a manhole and a nurse was taking care of him. And 2 days ago, there was an old man in the center of a road with 2 pigtail buckets full of gravel, patching a hole. So if we are tossing all this technology and money and ISO standards and so on, as you've reported in your submission, what would account for that state that we're in today in 2018? So one side is drainage, one side is roads, and I hope that we can build the conversation going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I think I may need to make a statement, a covering statement, in terms of the remit of the Ministry of Works and Transport. Our remit stems from, in terms of roadway, it stems from legislation. And we are directly responsible for highways and main roads. And in terms of drainage, main watercourses. We are very clear on the fact that once it floods, or once there is something wrong with the road, the Ministry of Works and Transport is generally identified as the responsible party. However, that is not necessarily always the case because of what we are responsible for. There are a number of agencies who also have responsibility for roadway and for drainage, inclusive of Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, as well as the Ministry of Agriculture. Now, even though I place that covering statement, we try not to limit ourselves, once we have the resources, both physical or financial, to simply the areas that we are directly responsible for. I need to say that because many of the areas that are identified are not directly under our remit. So that's a covering statement. When we go to the issue of drainage, we would have identified in the documentation that we have there that flooding is a result of a number of different issues. When we bring it to the specific 2017 occurrence that you spoke of, and even 2016, what we found was that in a number of the areas affected, the flooding, the rainfall in the last couple of years, it is moving away, and rather dramatically, from the norm. So even the flooding that occurred I think it was about 2 weeks ago, in the Piarco area, when we looked at the statistics in terms of the amount of rainfall that was dumped on that area, and when I say dumped, I mean that fell at a point in time, the drainage infrastructure simply did not have the capacity to take the waterfall. And that is occurring in a number of areas. Barring that, when we examine what happened last year, what we have sought to do is, one, we identify that we had a siltation problem happening, building up over time. And we've developed a program for desilting the watercourses, which we have costed. We've sent to Cabinet, and we've recently gotten approval, and we plan to put that in place. We also identify that a lot of our infrastructure in terms of pumps and gates to deal with the capacity when it happens, when the capacity is more than the infrastructure is able to take, that quite a bit of that infrastructure was aged. We had a number of issues. So once again, we have developed another program for that, which we are seeking to put in place. Some before the end of this financial year and moving over into the next financial year. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take immediate short-term steps to mitigate against what happened last year. At the same time, we are continuing with our overall studies because we have to do studies. These areas in particular where drainage is concerned, it's not something that it's a quick fix. We have to go in and do the studies, and we are continuing with the studies and implementation of the programs coming out of the studies. So that is drainage. In terms of roadway, once again, I'm not sure which pothole which hole you're referring to in specificity. I know I got one on my WhatsApp recently of a man fishing, and I know that was not ours.
I just have one follow-up before I pass on to one of my colleagues, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned, and I agree with you, there are several. I don't think the public understands the difference between main roads, secondary roads, and there is some confusion in terms who is responsible for it. But in the eyes of the public, that they are taxpayers, and they really shouldn't have to argue who is going to fix it in terms of whose responsibility it is. My question is, what is the current conversation arrangement between the multiple ministries that have to take responsibility for all roadways? Is a conversation happening? Does various reps turn up to meetings? The public servants who are guided with the responsibility for these things, do they turn up at meetings to have these conversations to make sure that all the information is at the table? Because, you see, as a member of parliament, they come knocking on my doors on social media, and other MPs here, and they ask me to fix roads. One man say, Parry, why don't fix the Naparima Mia road? Right, as if I have the power and the authority to do it. So clearly, and I want to know, based on what you said, if that communication is working to the best interests of the public.
Okay, no, I agree with you totally, member. I have no desire when I go down in a pothole to find out who's responsible for it. All I know is that I want it fixed. In terms of the conversation between the different agencies, I know that we have been seeking to closely liaise with our counterparts in local government, our counterparts in the different regional corporations. One of the recent initiatives started in terms of fixing some of the roadways regarding the pothole situation is one that we're trying to do across the board. I can probably let the Director of Highways speak to it a little further, but that is something that we've been trying to work together with not just at the ministry level in terms of local government, but at the corporation level in terms of trying to put our resources together to get the things done.
You may be aware that repairing potholes is very important for the Ministry of Works and Transport. And we went so far as to launch our MEN program, where we're encouraging people to call into the Ministry of Works, lay a complaint about the potholes, and we within the Ministry of Works will try our best to repair it. Now, what we have found in that program that we launched is a lot of the complaints relates to WASA and relates to local government. So a decision was taken recently in the Ministry of Works is that we now need to establish contacts with all the regional corporations to ensure that when we receive a complaint, there's a mechanism by which we could pass it on to the relevant body, and we could pass that information to the person who is making the complaint. So we are right now working on that system. We will share with the corporation and the public our inventory of the roads that fall under the Ministry of Works. A simple rule of thumb that we use is anytime it ends with a road, 90% of the time it falls under the Ministry of Works. So, for example, Knapmeyer Road. There's a 90% chance that that falls under Ministry of Works. If you have Edward Street or Frederick Street, once it has street with it, you know for sure that it falls under the local government body. Right? So we took that decision that we're going to pass on the information. The second decision we took is that we need to share resources because we need to address all the potholes in Trinidad. So recently, we sent out communication to all the local government bodies, inviting them to contribute materials for the Agua Santa plant, and through that plant, we will make hot mix available for them so that they could repair the potholes because they have constraints, and we recognize that they have constraints. That initiative to date is working quite well. I think we got 3 corporations on board, and some of the corporations even using their resources to help us to patch our roads. And when they help us to patch our roads, we in turn will make hot mix available to them through their work. So we know we have a responsibility to repair all the potholes, and we are trying to make sure that we share the resources across all agencies with the responsibility. Today, I think there was a complaint at Las Lomas number 1 road where WASA had dug up that road. I met with WASA yesterday. We're making hot mix available to them, and we are trying to address that road. And we will continue that initiative.
Good morning, Madam PS. Good morning, team. Fundamental question, frank answer requested. Is it impossible or too expensive to build roads that last in Trinidad? If the answer is no, which I hope it is, then why aren't we doing that?
The answer is no. It is not impossible or too expensive to build roads that last. The answer in terms of why aren't we doing that, we are building roads that can last. We are building roads that can last. If the roads are not impacted by certain situations, for instance, one of the issues we have on our roadway is the question of axle loading. Different roads are supposed to be geared for different type of vehicles. When a vehicle comes into the country and is licensed, it is licensed in a certain way. Larger vehicles have to go to our transport board, and when they are licensed, invariably they are advised as to where they are supposed to be traversing. This is not something that happens in Trinidad and Tobago.
Why?
Well, the easy answer is enforcement. The difficult answer is responsibility. I would want to imagine it has to start at the beginning. You are given a license to pass on certain roads. You should be responsible enough to pass on those roads. That's the beginning of it, in my opinion.
So it's a law enforcement issue?
It is an enforcement issue, but The reason I'm stressing on the other side of it is because many of the issues that plague the life of roadways in Trinidad and Tobago, many of the issues that plague the ability of the infrastructure to have the capacity in terms of rainfall, many of the issues that result from having to do continuous desilting exercises really result from the beginning point of the individuals. Many of the issues can be avoided if, as individuals, we would take personal responsibility for certain things. And then there's the other side of the enforcement. The enforcement is
P.S. That response sounds like the system is broken response.
Just for clarity, we are talking here about those vehicles, those trucks with the S in the circle, right? Yeah. Because I remember having an experience when I worked at Rio Claro, that, and this is where the question about the coordination between the ministries comes in, that agriculture had an access road extension program where they were extending the access roads. And the trucks to carry in the mix and the gravel and the motor graders and the excavators and so on had to go on your normal agricultural access road. And it was questionable whether those roads, the existing access roads, were designed for that kind of equipment to traverse. And they were going in fully loaded with gravel and mix. So at the end of the program, they destroyed the corporation roads. They threatened the agricultural access roads. But if you drove past all of that, you found some nice brand new roads, the extension roadways. Good? You know, so I often wondered as to the level of collaboration, including the Ministry of Planning, who would have a national plan involved in terms of what towns, what areas are to be developed and so on, and therefore the commuter system that has to be placed in there, how all that is sorted out.
P.S. through you to Mr. Ramsingh. Mr. Ramsingh, this might sound facetious, but it's not meant to be. Why does it take so long to fix potholes? And I'm giving you the context. I am the MP for Muruga Tableland. The majority of the roads are deplorable. Some of them have potholes so huge you could probably lose one of those trucks in them very easily. If I call someone that works at Princestown and I say, come and meet me at so-and-so spot, there is a crater here that I would like you to fix, it will get done. Short of that, apparently the trees don't fall in the forest and no one hears them. Do you have a methodology or a mechanism for monitoring these roads? And then what is the loop between identification and implementation of solution? Without me having to literally go to every giant crater and say, fix this, fix this, fix this, which is what I do now. That's a cul-de-sac. That is not the way you get things done in a way that actually is effective.
Basically, we have a system in place right now where our supervisors, they are supposed to drive all the roads within a fortnight and pick up all the defects, right? So we do have a list of all the defects. Once these defects come into the Ministry of Works, we have to quantify in terms of how much material and resources we need to do the works. It's no secret that we will never have, we don't have adequate resources to do all the works that we pick up for the fortnight. So we have to do prioritization. You would find that we spend a lot of time and effort on the main road network, on the Knapmeyer Road, on the main roads, right? And once we tackle all the defects, which is the potholes, which causes safety for motorists on the main roads. Our next priority is to go into the secondary and tertiary roads, right? Hence the reason why I told you before that because of the resource constraint that we have, I am trying to partner with the local government with success, that we are giving them the mix, and they are helping us to do the holes on the tertiary and secondary roads. We do have what you call a network of roads that are in fair to poor condition. These roads have reached the design life. They're in excess of 7 to 10 years old, and we do get formation of potholes, right? It is the ministry plan within to develop a 5-year plan. We would like to ensure that our roads are maintained, at least the surface is maintained in a good condition. Because if it is in good condition, the frequency by which potholes occur will be far less. And hence, we have developed a 5-year program. We'll be putting that forward to the Ministry of Finance to make the funding available to us so that we'll be in a position to manage the amount of potholes that we have out there and not in a position to react to what is happening out there now. Within the Ministry of Works, we are working to try to double our resources so that we could respond much more quickly to this problem.
All right, final question, Chair, in this segment. Mr. Ramsing, to you again through the PS. Mr. Phillip is in the process of giving the community our first major upgrade in my living memory on the Muriga Road. And kudos to Pure for its work in doing that. WASA is making that as difficult as it possibly can. Not purposefully, but given the problems it faces in terms of its pipes under those roads. What is the status of the discussion with WASA in terms of some new mechanism, some new technology, some new idea, floating all these lines, whatever is required to solve these problems? Because I think most MPs could attest here. The leaks that WASA suffers are habitual, meaning it's the same leaks in the same spots over and over. And it becomes a cycle where you fix, they destroy, you fix, they destroy, and the roads are never qualitatively improved. Is there a discussion ongoing? What's the nature of the discussion? Is there a potential solution? Because that will remain, aside from other issues, the greatest threat to the road quality in this country.
Member, I know you asked Mr. Ramsing, but he has asked me to deal with it. Our discussion with WASA is ongoing. What we do is that we give WASA our program at the beginning of every year. We seek to identify to them what we plan to do. And anytime they have to do major works, new works, they come to us for a permit. We have been in discussions for a little while now, and hopefully we're closing those discussions soon on the development of an MOU with WASA in terms of seeking to ensure that the standard of repair is at a certain standard. In terms of WASA's technology, though, I can't say that we have really gone into any deep discussions with them. But we hope we will continue to talk, and we have been doing using some new techniques in terms of how we are developing the roadway, and we'd be more than willing to discuss with them, any sharing in that area.
Have they been pliable? Pliable.
Pliable. Well, they have in the recent past been seeking to work with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Listening to comments that are being made in relation to the entire system and the efficiency of dealing with potholes and maintenance of the roadworks, and notwithstanding some of the initiatives that you're putting in place in terms of working with the other ministries and other institutions in relation to getting ahead of and dealing with that issue of potholes, I did not hear any initiatives coming forward in terms of dealing with usage of the roads. Because I think you identified that the problem being usage of these roads not being used the way they should be, creating the potholes and whatnot going forward. So I've heard where you've said that you're going to deal with the potholes that are there and you have a plan for that. But if you don't deal with the usage, then you're just going to end up in the same problem where these potholes are going to start being generated faster than you can fix them, no matter how many resources you throw into the initiatives that you're putting forward. So I'm asking, what initiatives do you have in place to sort of bring that usage back into what it should be, and what technology are you using to help you better manage the entire system? For example, GIS. So somebody calls in, tells you about a pothole, and in your ministry you have a map of the road work, computerized or digitized, and that pothole immediately in real time is put up so that, one, you can better understand, based on usage again, what parts of the country there seems to be a problem, so you could target usage in that area. Do you have anything like that forthcoming or already in place?
In terms of the question of enforcement, because that's what you're speaking of, in terms of enforcement, we have where we are looking in terms of developing a number of weighbridge stations where we would be able to pull aside trucks, weigh them. If they are over the required limit, they will be charged. So that is in progress as well. We also, in terms of the GIS mapping, I'm very glad you brought that up, because that's something we're trying to bring in for roadways, drainage, coastal, so that at the end of the day, what we want to be able to have is a full map, all the sites where we have all our existing infrastructure, also where we have our intended infrastructure to be placed. So that is something that we are working on as well.
Okay,
we also have, we are also working our motor vehicle officers. We have increased the numbers there over time, and part of it is to try to improve enforcement.
Have you all also looked at, in relation to the weigh stations, because I'm wondering, for some of these trucks that may be overweight, pathway to get from point A to point B, is it that for a business, for example, that needs to utilize these trucks to get from point A to point B in a particular time, can find a route where they are allowed to be on that road from point A to point B? Or is it that they must at some point, based on our road infrastructure in Trinidad and Tobago, end up on a road that is not set up for that kind of weight that they would be carrying? Because that might be a problem you run into with your weigh stations.
Yes. In terms of the routing for the trucks, I will let our Chief Technical Officer speak to that, because he chairs the Transport Board on that.
Chairman, members. Yes, the Trinidad Transport Board is the body responsible for recommending to the Transport Commissioner the registration of vehicles over 15 tons, 15 metric tons. We are, however, constrained by the law, which specifies the axle load a maximum of 10 tons. So an operator of trucks can buy a vehicle, a fairly big vehicle, and show clearly how the axles are limited to 10 tons. The Transport Board, however, limits vehicles by length, height, width, and that sort of things. The issue really is in the enforcement, because we do specify roads that vehicles must stick to, must keep to. There have been many instances where they are off the routes, as said already. It's a matter of enforcement. With respect to the limiting the axle load into 10 tons, there's no other way to do it than to weigh the vehicles when it's loaded. And the Highways Division is taking steps, as PS has said, to install some scales so we could have that in place. With respect to something that was said earlier, the construction of the agricultural access road. The fact is, sometimes we have to make allowances because it is unreasonable for, let's say, the government to be constructing a road and the respective ministry that is doing cannot get access to the site with materials. So sometimes we do make allowances. The south of Trinidad is heavily industrialized, and there are cases where we have to accept overloading on the roads because we can't shut down our energy industry, obviously. So there are instances where we allow overweight vehicles on the roads. So yes, I would have to say the matter is in enforcement to a great degree.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if it still happens. You know, you hear people tell these stories of you all working, Mr. Ramsing and his team work very hard, paving a road, and around the corner, WASA waiting to come and dig it up. Again, no offense to WASA, they're doing their job as well. We need water. Just as we want to get rid of potholes and flooding, we do need water for our consumption. But and Chairman, Mr. Chris, you remember, I don't know if it still occurs that at the corporation level, they used to have a meeting called the coordinating meetings. Yeah, they still have it, but the attendance of both parties, because I'm assuming to you all, WASA sometimes could come as the enemy with regards to the potholes and stuff. Have you all been attending to these meetings, and more so has WASA been attending? Because that worked to the extent that the Martin Corporation, the time I was there. And the second question is it time that somebody stands up and says that maybe we should stop WASA from attempting to patch up holes, and or you work closely with them or train their contractors with that? Because I'm sure most of the times you will see they go against the grade sometimes. It's just a quick patch up, and I know it probably frustrates the hell out of, or they put mud or big stone. Mr. Ramsing and his jobs trying to keep, because most of the potholes are from WASA, and even when they do attempt to pave or patch up the holes, sometimes, as the member said, it's sharply done. Is it high time that something is done, whether a training course or you all take over the paving of these potholes? Have you all had these discussions?
Member, in terms of the coordinating meetings, we attend. I will admit that at times we may have a resource constraint, because given how the district may be manned at any given point in time and the number of meetings, we did have that as an issue coming up quite recently, and we are seeking to make sure that our attendance is much more regular. In terms of WASA, that issue is part of the MOU that we are seeking to finalize with them in terms of standards for repair.
Mr. Chair, I want to stay on the potholes. In your reports that you submitted, you indicated that, a roadway should last around 7 years. And I have noticed within recent times that a lot of engagement took place with respect to pothole repairs. Is it that we are repairing potholes on a temporary basis so that it would just last for a short time within the 7-year period? Or are we really seriously doing pothole maintenance to last a long period of time? Because what we see happening within this last year is over previous years, many potholes were repaired, and it lasts only a short period of time, because I have a network page too, and people said that as soon as the pothole was repaired, after a few months, it was back to a pothole again. Have you considered that, or is it that is a standard procedure in the Ministry of Works to repair potholes as a temporary procedure until the road is repaired properly?
A pothole is a condition associated with the type of roads, right? In Trinidad and Tobago, we have basically two types of roads. We have roads that were engineered, properly engineered with time, and those are the roads that, you know, like the Solomon Hocha Highway, the CRH, and the main roads. So those were designed to sustain a certain amount of loading and to last a certain amount of time. Those roads, traditionally, if we repave the Solomon Hocha Highway or the Uriah Butler Highway, we will get up to 10 years without the formation of a pothole. If we don't, for whatever reason, 7 to 10 years arrives and we don't do some kind of repaving on the road, that's the time that the road starts forming cracks. The cracks get wider, and when they reach the point where you have alligator cracking, you get potholes. And that's the time we have to come in and repair those holes. Those repairs in a road that has proper drainage and so forth will last in excess of 2-3 years. But remember, it's a symptom of the road. We at the Ministry of Works have to find the funds at some point or the other to repave that road. So once, after 10 years, we have the funding and we could repave those roads, you will have no more potholes in that road. So in other words, the potholes that we do on the highway will last within 2 to 3 years until such time that we repave the roads. The other type of roads we have is those that evolve with time. They were once tracks built on the ridges on the road, typical in Maruga and in South. Now these roads, because of the soil type, the terrain, right, and it evolved with time, the deterioration model for those roads are different. Those roads, you get depressions, right? You have wassa digging up the road. So those roads are much more difficult to maintain. And we generally, our first response when we do a pothole is to make the road safe. So we get in there, we fill the hole up, and we seal it with asphalt, because it's better to fill the hole than to have a car going into the hole and causing safety issues. I would love, at some point in time, to ensure that all my roads can be maintained in a fair to good condition, and at that point in time, we'll ensure that when we get into repair pothole, it will be well repaired. That's what you call steady state maintenance, right? Once we repair it, it should last between 3 to 5 years until we come around to maintain the road.
I want to go back to the whole question on Weybridge Bridge, because PSU alluded to the fact of lack of enforcement. And I'm of the opinion that, you know, people must be given the tools to allow for enforcement. And with that, I want to ask you, because you all, the Ministry of Works, you all I saw a statement in The Guardian which said that you all would be putting Weybridge at strategic location across the country. Could you tell us where those Weybridge are to be placed?
Presently, we have the Weybridge at the new MVA building is in full operations, and you will see licensing office from time to time will be pulling heavy trucks and taking them to Caroni, right, and carrying out weight control. We have another way site at Golconda, which is at the Point Fortin Highway site, the old site office. Right now, we are in the process of getting the calibration and certification for those scales, and within the month or so, the licensing officers will be pulling trucks off the road in South. Right? They will take you off the highway into the Golconda compound, and will carry out weight enforcement.
I have 2 more questions. What is the current fine for an overweight truck?
Pardon?
What is the current fine for an overweight truck?
I think it's about $1,000. But the problem with it is the inconvenience when we pull you across, because you cannot continue on the journey with the load. So you must offload the truck at the site. So the contractor has to bring a loader or some kind of other mechanism to remove the material. So the fine may be small, but the inconvenience is substantial.
Right, but has the Ministry of Works been pursuing the increase in fine for the trucks that are overweight, so that, you know, it's a prevention method instead of having to have an enforcement method?
Member, be aware that the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act has been under constant review in recent times, and I'd want to believe that you're making a suggestion that we increase the fine.
No, I'm making a request or I'm asking a question because it relates to your roads, and one thing leads to another. And I'm asking if it has ever been an idea or thought by the Ministry of Works and Transport to pursue by way of communication to have fines for trucks, you know, increase, because we're looking at preventative methods. If we increase the fines, then we would not have to engage in so much enforcement and look to have weighbridges all across the country. And still, like I say, you don't have a proper weighbridge in the east-west corridor, and we have a lot of gravel pits up there destroying the roadways. So what I'm asking if the Ministry of Works and Transport ever considered the point that they should do some kind of a communication to engage legislation to raise the fines for trucks that are overweight.
It is something that we will consider seriously at our next step in reviewing the legislation.
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to go into the document that was submitted with some responses. On page 14 of your response page, you've provided us with some, I would assume, a service level arrangements. I'm not sure if it's an agreement in determining some of your routine activities in terms of how many times through the year you do particular maintenance exercises. What I would want to know is what is the percentage, if you can say, of delivery of this agreement in terms of you have an organization that is making a commitment to do 7 times a year you're cutting the grass on main highways during the rainy season, 4 times during the dry season. Do you monitor the efficiency of that in terms of a key performance index? Are we meeting those targets? If we're not meeting the targets, who's responsible for that? Is your supervisory system in terms of monitoring those things, is it effective? It is working. If it is not, what are you doing to improve that? Because what's missing here really is the analysis. So saying that you're going to do it 7 times a year is nice, but you should tell me, look, we're aiming for 7, but based on the resources we have, we can only do 4. So when we as a committee understand that, well, then in our reporting, we're going to ask that you be given the resources to move 4 to 6 at the end of the day. So I just want to get a feel on particularly that first table 2 is, are you meeting those agreement targets that you all have set out as an organization?
If I'm understanding you correctly, Vice Chair, that we would have to get that documentation, we can document it and we can submit it to you, and we can take it further from there.
Okay, but in terms of where we at in terms of maintenance, because again, like MP Francis, I too normally would have to call our local works office and give them reminders, say, look, this side of this road, apparently, you know, the grass is very high. Sometimes I drive through Manzanilla, and the grass on the sides of the roads in Manzanilla is so high, it's really a danger, especially when you have, you know, oncoming traffic on both sides. So what I was trying to get at, without even the data, I mean, you're an organization that I see are using a lot of MIS applications further down in terms of being able to give you the statistics, whether we are meeting our targets. Because as service organizations, if we can't measure what we do, we can't tell whether we're doing it well or well enough. So perhaps one of the things going forward is when these targets are set in terms of from the MIS perspective, perhaps we need to start monitoring those things and say, are we meeting our targets? Because I remember long ago in my own job space, when I go to my boss and tell him, look, I want more resources, he say, well, you're not giving me any bullets to go shoot with. I can't go and ask for more money. You can't tell me you just want 5 man. Tell me, what are you missing? What is the current statistics? And I'll go and look for more revenue for you. So that's one thing in terms of the data. I'm interested in how effective the supervision is happening. Because the public is expecting, well, look, they call an officer, you know, about a pothole the sides of the road, something is happening. But Mr. Ramsing said that supervisors ought to be monitoring this on a bi-weekly, every fortnight, compile reports and so on. Again, the data ought to tell me perhaps per district, I see you have 4 operational districts. How many of those reports are coming in? How effective is the delivery? If 100 comes in, am I only doing 20? Am I only doing 30? Am I only doing 50? Because that will lead us in a particular way in terms of what do we need to fix it. Because I am always very conscious of the fact that these JSCs ought to ask the Parliament to give you the resources you need to find solutions. So the data is nice how it's presented, but if we don't get a feel of how effective these agreements are, then it adds value to our reporting. So supervision is something that I want you to speak on, whether you are satisfied that the level of supervision that is required, you are actually receiving it.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. Now, in terms of how we actually implement these systems, as you are aware, we do have a district system, and we have the district then based on sub-offices. We do have a resource constraint in terms of personnel. So while we have the maintenance management system that we've sought to implement, we have had challenges in terms of having the adequate amount of people to input the data, also in terms of some of our supervisory staff. The Director of Highways will and does have regular monthly meetings with his district supervisors, seeking to ensure that the program that we've put in place can be implemented based on our resources. We can provide you with the data in terms of how many times per year we do certain activities. But we do have a resource constraint in terms of human resource constraint as well as equipment. As the Ministry of Works and Transport, it is a common view that we have all manner of equipment and types for all different types of jobs. What has happened is that over the years, we do have an aging fleet of equipment, and we are looking to deal with that incrementally. We're putting up a program for that. And we have also started discussions with our unions in terms of seeking to put in place the necessary labor capital at a certain level to do the required maintenance work.
You mentioned that you have aging fleets, right?
Yes.
To your best knowledge, in terms of our overall fleet of equipment, tractors, backhoes, and so on, what percentage is in actual working condition versus those that are down for repairs or at a derelict stage? You have an idea?
I will let the Director of Mechanical Services speak to this
Please.
Particular question. I have a figure off the top of my head, but I don't want to.
Yes. Yeah, good morning again. Concerning the backhoes and equipment, the majority of the equipment are over 10 years of age, right? And in terms of availability, we may have, I would say maybe about, overall, maybe about 25%, if so much.
25%
of the overall fleet, overall fleet, yeah, would be active because
and 75% somewhere in between,
yeah,
not working well and totally,
yeah, looking, awaiting parts and so on too, and again with age and with the cost. Remember, as the equipment gets older, it's more and more repairs have to be done, and that is some of the issues we have to, whether or not to border survey it, but then again when you border survey it, the funding to buy new equipment.
How long has this particular issue of this rough figure of 25% been on the table in terms of, I'm aware there's 25% use, operational vehicles. What is the plan, or have there been a plan in terms of renewals, recycling, maintenance to move this figure up to 30% or 40%? Because clearly, I cannot see you running a ministry with your capital asset down at 25%. And I can't see a ministry not going to a line minister and say, boss, 25%, we can deliver for you and your government. Is that a conversation that is happening right now? Because 25% to me is probably where the butt of the problem is starting.
So let me take that conversation. The reason I didn't originally want to give a figure is because that's the process that we are going through right now. We have someone who has been identified, dedicated to quantify all of our equipment, to identify the status in terms of good, poor, fair. Mr. Jogi, who is our Director of Mechanical Services, gave that off the top figure of 25%. We are not quite sure it's there as yet, but that is where we are.
It could be less.
Could be more.
Oh, okay.
I always like to look at the full part of the glass. Could be more. No, but in addition to that, we have approached the Ministry of Finance, even while we are doing this, in order to get some certain critical pieces of equipment back and in order. And it is a multifaceted, and I know, Chair, you may be a little concerned about the amount of times I'm going to say this, but it's a multifaceted approach. So we have to work on the equipment, we have to work on the human capital to operate the equipment, we have to work constantly on trying to get over to the public that there are steps that they need to take so that we can reduce the type of work that we have to get into on a consistent basis. We have to work with our partner agencies, other ministries, in order to ensure that we do not duplicate. So it's a number of pieces that have to come together, and we're trying to ensure that we've identified each area and we are addressing.
I just have a question and a comment before we move on, Mr. Chair. The question that I have, and I don't think I got an answer when I asked it, was, were you satisfied with the level of supervision that is required to deliver to the public in terms of the response? As a question.
As the PS had mentioned, right now, in terms of the supervisors who are responsible for the daily supervision of the workforce, we are short by 50%.
50%?
Yes, and we have been making effort to try to fill that critical role, because they are the frontline supervisors. The challenge we have is we are waiting. Once we get all these positions filled, then we know at the Ministry of Works have to train these people, because a lot of attrition is happening. A lot of people are retiring, not attrition, sorry.
Yeah.
A lot of people are retiring, and they're taking their knowledge with them. So we are waiting to get the full complement, and then we will carry out an intense training program on our maintenance management system. In the interim, with the 50% staff that we have, we personally carry out training with them. We ensure that they go out and they supervise the work, right? They now have to double up a lot of times, because if you had enough supervisors, we would visit every maintenance gang at least twice for the fortnight. Right now, we could do it maybe once for the fortnight, right? Because of the short staff. In terms of the level of service that is delivered, we do have the software, which we call the routine maintenance management system. This software is a data-hungry software, so that we have the systems in place where we bring the information into the software. And from the software, we could generate a report on the amount of times that we did routine maintenance activity on every road. So the tools are there. The capability to do the training on the tools, we have it. What we are waiting on, and we anxiously await, is the resources in terms of the supervisors, so that we could effectively utilize the tool. As I indicated before, this don't stop us, because we try as best as possible to ensure that we use the tool. In terms of the level of service for the highway, if you look at the highways like the Solomon Hocher Highway and the Uriah Butler Highway, you will see that we are achieving that level of service. Now, we want to do better, but with the resources that we have, we are achieving this vegetation, the grass height of 450 millimeters. you'll realize that the width of vegetation control that we do in the shoulder, we try to reduce it and compromise the amount that we could do in order to ensure that our highways are well maintained.
Okay. Just the comment now before I finish my thing. WASA has a very interesting application that I installed last week on my smartphone, and I try to get councillors in my my corporation to use it. And in the application, I walk up to a leak and I snap a photo. When I snap the photo of the leak, I insert my name, my email address, my phone number, and it takes a GPS position and it sends. And I did that on Wednesday evening, and Thursday evening, WASA was repairing the leak. So I was amazed, and I'm glad that it worked. I don't know when the bulk comes up if the same quality of service will be maintained. But it was very interesting to see how the app worked, and it worked well. And I'm saying, you know, the public complains, you know, we complain about every pothole and so on, and sometimes they put a report, they don't tell you, well, close to which light pole number, they tell you it on this stretch of road. If perhaps the MIS systems that you all are looking at would give the public the tool to be able to snap these things, upload it, and just how WASA has it working, it may reduce the need for the fortnight visits of your road supervisors driving up and down, and we sensitize the public. Well, look, this tool help us to help you, you know, at the end of the day. So it's something worth considering.
Vice Chair, we take note of that because we do have the 623 men where you can call in. You can also send the picture, but the GPS positioning, I think we will ensure that we seek to develop that as well.
We are working on it.
And I'm advised that it has been worked on, that aspect of it.
Madam PS, roads all over Trinidad under the Ministry of Works are prone to slippage. South in particular. My constituency might be the capital of landslips in this country. Is there a Ministry of Works plan for dealing with landslips? And a second part of that, is there the chance of reverting to what I will call more cultural practices of dealing with landslips? For example, when I was a child, the entire roadway to Muruga was planted with bamboos on both sides, and the landslips were rare. The dawn of CPEP meant the death of the bamboo, and it meant numerous landslips. It meant having to build walls to box in the entire road, which really doesn't work. Is there a plan? And what are you looking at in terms of the plan? And those old school cultural practices, do they still have a role in maintaining our roads, particularly in rural areas?
Well, member, yes, that's fine. The ministry does actually have a program called the Bridges, Landslip, and Traffic Management Program, and it was specifically developed to address the backlog of bridge deterioration, landslips, and traffic management issues. I believe this is our third year. We're going into our third year in terms of this program, where an inventory was done across Trinidad, and all outstanding works were prioritized, and we are seeking to do on a yearly basis address the issue of landslips. I have heard the terminology that you just used in terms of your particular area being the capital of landslips, but and in that context, we have tried actually to have some measure of concentration in that area, not just in our specific program dealing with bridges and landslip, but also in our other programs under the PURE program and under the ministry's overall program.
And my second question, to piggyback on the Vice Chairman's concern with supervision, the other side of the coin. I am old enough to remember when Ministry of Works did major projects directly with the great trucks. Now much of that is contracted out. Is the ministry satisfied with the quality, and this is my wicked question for the day, the quality of the contracting work that is done generally in this country. And I say that in the context of numerous instances where roads are fixed and within a matter of days, they literally start deteriorating. So is the ministry satisfied generally? Instances where it is not satisfied, what measures are taken? How does the ministry monitor the quality of the contracting work that is done in this country in terms of particularly roads?
Now, this is a question that I will have the Director of Highways and our Program Director, PO, go into some measure of detail in terms of how we monitor. The part of the question that I want to directly address is the issue of, over the years, what has happened. Now, at one point in time, as you rightly said, when you were younger, the ministry undertook quite a bit of works, construction works. At one point in time, there was a decision, well, a policy decision at one time that the ministry would be moving away from direct works. There was some discussion in terms of developing an authority to do roadworks and maintenance. And that resulted in the ministry being depleted because it was felt that if it is that we are going towards an authority and we would be more of a management-based ministry, we would not seek to replace a certain type of human capital. Now, with that caused the degradation of our ability to actually undertake physical works if we don't have the resources. We are at a position, once more, however, where the ministry is more and more being called on to do works, to monitor works, to implement. And it is with that in mind that we are trying to aggressively build back our human capital, aggressively build back our stock of inventory. Now, even in that context, we have, over time, we have to monitor works. We have to monitor the contractors. So I'll let our Director of Highways and PO go into the details as to how the work is monitored.
Yes, if I could just interject one more wicked question to add some more context. Does past quality of work, or the lack thereof, play any part in terms of determining the selection of contractors for major projects?
That is not a wicked question. That is a very good question, actually.
I will speak about the large projects, right? Because I was directly involved with the mega projects, the construction of the interchanges. Now, in those projects, we do hire independent consultants, and they're the eyes and the ears of the Ministry of Works. Their primary role is to ensure that the works are done according to specifications. Right? The specification is the part of the tender document that defines what quality of work the contractor should give us. The quality of the material and workmanship is defined in that document. So in those projects, we do have problems. I would say you do have problems, but under the contract, the contractor has a responsibility to repair the defects, right? So from that type of projects, we do have much problems. From the Ministry of Works perspective, from the Director of Highways office, we do give out what you call the smaller contracts to do works for the landslips. Those works are supervised by the ministry staff, right? And again, despite the staff shortages, we ensure that from now on, those projects are well supervised, and the quality of the material that is given, that is used to construct the retaining walls and whatever, complies with the specification. More and more, I am calling upon the Ministry of Works, Soils and Material Lab to come out and take tests and so forth. So we do try our best, and if the contractor fails to comply to the specification, we tend to don't pay him for the work until it is redone. At the end of every project, we have to complete what you call an evaluation of the contractor. Each engineer that supervises the job must fill out that evaluation. And in that evaluation, he generally puts what is his view on the contractor. And if the contractor, for whatever reason, failed to perform the work in accordance to the spec, we generally will blacklist that contractor from inviting him from further jobs.
I'm so happy that you said that. Before Mr. Phillip, that you said the last part of that statement. Mr. Ramsing, I'm 43 years old. I didn't inhabit this body yesterday. I've been in the same body for my entire life. Within my community, there have been contractors, and not small contractors, big contractors, who have come and done work. The work has been poor. The work has been abysmal. The work has created numerous kinds of problems, social and otherwise. And yet somehow, these poor contractors constantly get work and continue to get work. If there is a procedure for assessing them and evaluating their work, I do not know how they can pass based on what they produce. How is it that work that is ostensibly bad to my eye, to the eye of any right-thinking person, to the eye of any person who can see, the work is bad? The work creates problems. You build a wall that falls short of a corner, and within months, the road starts to crumble right next to the wall. You build a wall that collapses before the wall finishes, and yet the contractor continues to get work. How is that possible?
I knew for a fact that you have to separate what the design called for and what the contractor does, right? A lot of times we do have problems, I have known, I've seen it there, where we construct a section of wall, and immediately after the wall, the slip continues to form, right? That is really a design problem. In terms of the wall collapsing, to me...
Wait, just to be clarified, those are merely examples.
Yes.
What I'm saying is bad work. You give them a road, bad work. You give them a wall, bad work. Give them a landslip, bad work. I'm not being specific here. Generally bad. But yet, repeatedly getting work. Repeatedly getting massive projects. It boggles the mind. Hence the question, what is your system of supervising and ensuring quality? Because I'm sure I'm not crazy, and I'm sure there are other MPs here who could support me in this assertion. There are people who do bad work consistently, and yet they are still employed.
Member, the Director of Highways and the Director of PURE would go through the system that we utilize in terms of certifying work. And there is a system that we use. That is not to say that what you have said may not have happened in the past or may not happen in the future.
Or is happening now.
Or is happening now. The fact that it may have happened in the past, may be happening now, or may happen in the future, is not as a result of not having the system to deal with it. Because in the ministry, we have had occurrences of what you've just identified, and we've tried to deal with them. Where it is, we found that work was done and was signed off, and then we find that it was not to standard, or if it was not to to the required specification, we would seek to address this with the engineer who would have signed off on the work. We've had instances where we've had work where we cannot find the contract to see whether or not it was done to specification. This has happened over time. But we are seeking to deal with them when they come to our attention. Once again, this comes back to the issue of enforcement, supervision, and enforcement, which we are trying to put in place in terms of actively working the system, because it's there. I made the interjection, member, because we cannot sit here and say that it has never happened. That would be, but that does not mean that we do not have the system in place, nor it does not mean that we have not been undertaking numerous projects that have been done to specification, to cost, and has provided the solution to the problem.
Just one more, Glenda, before, if you don't mind. All right, well.
I want to add, because there seemed to be a level of compromise by the officials in ensuring that the public, the communities get quality work. Do you have within your ministry, because you spoke about a process a while ago, do you have within your ministry a process which allows for the voices of the communities to be heard? Because when something is built, and it is not built to the satisfaction of the users, it is felt by communities that there is some compromise by public officials. So I'm asking you, do you have a system within your processes to allow for the voices and complaints of a community who had just received something and they felt that they were shortchanged, they did not get what they're supposed to get? Because very visibly, they see work that seems not completed, but yet still they don't know who they could speak to, who they can go to, and where they could get answers. So within the structure of the civil service, public servants, officials, where is that structure? Or where is that process?
Chairman, members, now it's a work in progress, right? Now under the PURE program, we are probably the only unit that has design capability, project management capability in-house. So over the years, we have been providing designing manuals for our supervisors, training engineers with manuals to make it easy for when you go on a project, how you can supervise that project to ensure you get your quality for money. We have even taken a step further now where, as I said, it's a work in progress, so it would start with the PURE, then we'll go over to highways based on lessons learned from me. We actually, on all the projects we do, we actually have a unit we are now developing where we have we call it an outcomes unit. So on every project we do, throughout the life of the project, and we have documents, videos, where we speak to the community, we get their feedback, how the contractor work, are you interested in the job? We have videos, we have a lot of information on that, all right? Which, what we do at our monthly meetings, we will share our experiences and see how it works so we can put it through the rest of the unit. Now, with respect to the PURE program again, we have made more strides, I guess, because we have a dedicated design unit. So with respect to quality, we have an in-house lab, and we have in-house design capabilities. So before we start any project, a contractor, if he has a plant, is visited. Any material he's going to use, we go to the source, we take the material, we test. When the materials come to the site, we also test. So we have this ongoing process. Samples are taken. We do our own testing in-house, and we also use external labs also to do that testing. All right, so I think that we as I said, there is a process and there are constant training.
In addition to that, member, I think you specifically spoke to how can community members identify to the ministry if they see that there is an issue, and if we have a process for that. Now, for most of our projects, as Mr. Phillip would have indicated, for Pure, for Coastal, for a number of areas, before we even start the project, we try to do community consultation. Now, after the projects are completed in the different areas, we have a district system, and the district system allows anyone to come in and lodge a complaint if they find that a project has been done in their area that is not up to standard. We also have a website that you can lodge a complaint if you so choose. And I would also want to indicate that the directors of the different divisions also hold themselves available for anyone to submit either in writing, via phone call, request for anonymity. All of those things are available to the general public for any project under the Ministry of Works and Transport that it is found or it is suspected that there may have been some activity that was not to the standard required. I guess I'm trying to make this point abundantly clear to the viewing public and to the members, because we are seeking to take a very strong stance as far as we can to this issue of any sort of, I think the word that was utilized was compromise. We are not saying that it may not exist, but what we are saying is that if it exists, let us know, and we will seek to take the steps that can be taken in the situation.
Madam PS, I can account personally to the quality of work done by Pure in terms of interfacing with the community, in terms of answering questions, in terms of being responsive to issues. And I don't mean just verbally responsive, I mean being practically responsive in terms of trying to alleviate problems. I could attest to that. So that is not the issue. The issue is not with Pure or with the Ministry of Works. The issue that both members are raising is about the quality of contracting work and the repeated use of people who have done who have systematically produced poor work. Does that count against them in terms of bidding for a contract? I know we understand that we operate within the law. The government cannot break the law. But is this something you consider while during a tendering process, before a contract is awarded? Is it a major consideration, or is it just that the person who brings the best package at the best cost is given the contract, irregardless of their history, regardless of the quality of work they've done?
We're trying to develop that policy to blacklist them and hold on.
All contracts, all projects, when they're completed, you're supposed to be doing a certificate of completion. And there we are supposed to be identifying if there were any issues. When we put out to tender, we have not developed a blacklist. We're still looking at the law in terms of how far we can actually go with that. But the person's performance on previous jobs, it does come into play. We ask for one in the main, based on the size of the contract, types of jobs that you would have done previously, and we also ask for references.
Just a statement to end. It is my opinion, it is my considered opinion, that the era within which we could do things as a government, as a country, ad hoc, because we had the resources, or we thought we had the resources to do so, has ended. We have entered a new paradigm where we need to understand that when the state expends money to accomplish something, we need to get more than value for dollar. We can no longer entertain a culture within which it is expected that because the government is paying for something, we can do something substandard, and expect to be compensated very well fed. That has to end. That is something that we don't have to change at the Ministry of Works. We have to change it at every ministry, every institution, every state body. So I'm just putting it on record that the laissez-faire era that we've probably existed in for a generation here has ended. And these things need to be done more stringently. I'm not saying blacklist, but I'm saying the quality of what you produce must stand for you or must stand against you. And I'll rest the issue there.
Some clarification. Under PURE, the works that are done by contract, I take it? Okay. Could you give us an insight into how that contract system operates?
Okay. Our procurement unit is NIBDEC. So NIBDEC does our procurement. Okay, so when we have projects to go, we would write NIBDEC, and they would use their procurement system to engage contractors. Once contractor is engaged, then the PURE unit takes over all project management, all project supervision of that project. So we prepare all the designs, all the drawings, etc., and we would meet with the contractor, do pre-tender meeting, pre-construction meeting, and stuff like that, and then we take over the project. At the end of the project, whether it's interim payments or whether it's final payments, we have to certify all the payments, which will pass through the PS and then goes to NIBDEC for payment. All quality control assurance is done through the PURE unit.
And are you satisfied that that has been generating kind of work, quality of work to continue?
Yes, I am satisfied. And we have put things in place to ensure its satisfaction. An example would be 10 years ago, if a contractor come to pave a road, one, verification of scope would be done by a slip, ton, you know what I mean, a truck, say 10 tons of asphalt. We no longer do that. You have surveys before, you have surveys after. We don't pave a road without actually going and doing cores, doing test pits to see what is there, to decide what we do to get the road back to the level of service required. Even when you do asphalt and you supply us with asphalt on a road, we take samples. Some has to go to independent lab. We do testing for ourselves. You are only paid 80% of that upon completion. So even though your verification of your scope quantity is done, we still have to wait until the results come in from the actual asphalt to see that you met all the specifications and standards before you are paid. And that's just one example, right? There's concrete, there's every other example. And every year we get better, every year lessons learned, and every year we do something more to improve.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I just want to ask Mr. Gonzalez a question concerning these rogue developers. That seems to be one of the areas that contribute to the flooding in a lot of communities when they do their work with all the necessary permits and permissions. In your response, you have identified that there are over 20 cases that were detected in the past 2 years. How many of these cases are before the courts, or if any before the courts, or how far along are they in terms of those 20 that you have identified?
Thank you, Member. Now, let me first say that the present legislative framework as it relates to the powers of the Director of Drainage to embark upon enforcement measures for illegal development on River Reserve is very much limited. Unlike the Director of Highways, the powers of the Director of Highways that are constrained in statute under the Highways Act, we have no legislative framework for powers of the Director of Drainage per se. And what the ministry has been trying to do is to enforce certain provisions or invoke certain provisions of the Waterworks and Water Conservation Act, whereby the Director of Drainage was appointed the competent authority under that piece of legislation. It is very limited in the sense that it does not give the competent authority certain enforcement powers to take action against illegal development on lands that are designated River Reserve. It gives the Director of Drainage authority under the legislation to take certain action as it relates to clearing of main water courses. So the challenge is that, yes, even though based on the information provided by the Drainage Division that there are over 20 illegal developments on River Reserve, the Act does not give the Ministry or the Director certain enforcement powers to take action against the illegal development. What we try to do is to liaise with the other agencies like the Town and Country Planning Division, the municipal corporations, and those types of agencies that have the power to take action against illegal development.
Do you know if any of those other agencies are presently engaged in any type of action against these developers that have been identified by your ministry?
I know the Town and Country Planning Division recently has started an exercise where they are taking a more robust approach to illegal development, and that includes development on River Reserve. We try our best to continue to liaise with them and to work with them, but as I said earlier on, the constraint is that the Act does not give us that direct power to take action against the illegal developers.
So as of today, there's nothing can stop a developer dead in their tracks if it is identified that they are damaging the environment, they are the cause for flooding in communities.
Of course, under our development laws, the agencies like Ministry of the Town and Country Planning Division and the regional corporations, they have the powers under their respective legislation. So what we can do is try to use moral suasion to get them to invoke their powers under their respective legislation to take action against the illegal developers. But I want to say that it is a good, it's a good opportunity whereby we can consider legislation to empower the Drainage Division, more so the Director of Drainage, to take decisive action against persons engaged in illegal development close to rivers.
Anything before the LRC or the Attorney General's office in terms of looking at legislation to give you that power to deal with those things?
Well, prior to, there was a point in time the ministry started putting together a policy document. And that policy was looking at the creation of a drainage authority and giving certain enforcement powers to the Director of Drainage. And we were looking at model legislation like in certain Commonwealth jurisdictions. Unfortunately, that work stopped when the Drainage Division was removed from the ministry and placed in another ministry. Recently, it was the Drainage Division was reincorporated into the ministry, and we started working on that policy to address that concern.
Okay. Last question before I know we're running perilously close to the end. And I wanted to bring the coastal erosion unit into a bit of the conversation. Ms. Bernard, that I am very, very familiar with, quite active in my area in terms of the coastal erosion. I know we are coming out of this calamity, catastrophe out in Cedras. And we do have a bit of a similar development on the Guayguari Bay area, and several visits have been made, and I know conversations about possible solutions going before Cabinet is some way. Can you give us an update as to what's happening with those proposals for both probably North and South Cocos Bay and that Guayguari Bay area in terms of the coastal erosion?
Vice Chair, the Coastal Protection Unit, as you would be aware, would have completed a study in the Mayaro-Guaya area. Coming out of that study would have been recommendations for works at about 6 sites. We would have taken a note to Cabinet, and that note would have resulted in the approval of the incorporation of a program for Guayguari in the recent continuation and extension of the Critical Coastal Protection Program. So we are seeking to move that program forward in the next fiscal year, possibly, granted that the available funding is provided in the budget allocation.
I want to just be clear, coming from the legal department. So are you saying that I want to ask the question straight out, and I want a straight answer. Do all land development plans require approval from Drainage Division?
Yes, from my understanding, I'm sorry.
So if you require, if a person requires approval from the Drainage Division, why can't the Drainage Division ensure compliance? So what is that approval about then? And then I want you to describe the process involved in transferring the land development plans from Town and Country Planning Division, Ministry of Planning and Development, to the Drainage Division. And why is there not a subsequent follow-up of maintenance? Because maybe we can't go into those other questions for flooding, but I need to get this clarified, because I know there is a part where all land development plans require an approval from Drainage Division.
Member, to my knowledge, all land developments require approval from the Ministry of the Town and Country Planning Division. When it is taken to the Town and Country Planning Division, and it may be done so via the different regional bodies, when it is taken, they decide the different areas that you need to get approvals from, and they will let you know if you need to come to highways, if you need to come to the Drainage Division, and so forth, and then it will come to us.
So you are the last?
We are not the last. We are not the last, but we have to start with the first point of, if it goes to Town and Country in the first place to get approvals, that may not always be the case. And then when it goes, then they identify what type of approvals would be required, and it comes to whichever division is required from, and then we would go, we would identify what are the requirements, and then we would monitor to see whether or not they have complied with what was stated to be done, and then they would take that back to the...
Great. So are you telling me that the Town and Country Planning, they will outline the requirements for the applicant, and it will be managed or maneuvered through the Ministry of Works?
Through the different agencies that they have to go to, because not just the Ministry of Works, it's not just drainage, yes.
Okay,
all right. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the ministry for its cooperation with us this morning, and to give you notice that you are required to be back here on the 27th of March at 10 o'clock for us to continue our deliberations on this, and show the viewers that you have been noting the questions that have been coming in and would follow them up on the next occasion, as well as we intend to focus on the issues related to disaster management and your role in facilitating advanced preparation as well as recovery at the next session, so as to give that signal to the related departments. But we will continue the discussion on coastal management, given concerns of what's happening at Cedrus, as well as the broader issues with regard to planning and control of land development. So I want to thank you all again and invite the PS to make some closing comments.
Thank you, Chair. This is to say that at the Ministry of Works and Transport, we take the responsibility that has been placed on us very seriously. We are aware that we have systems that need to be reviewed, and we are also aware of a number of our constraints which we are working on. So our intention when we come before you is to indicate and to state what there is and what we are planning to do. We take all the inputs from the members very seriously. We want to also agree with Member Lavelle Francis, that work has to be done where value for money is one of the major aspects of everything that we do. But in particular as well, that we find solutions for the problems, for the root cause of the problems. As we said at the beginning, we consider this committee our committee. So we look forward to being back here on the 27th of March, and we'll try our best once again to provide all the information that is required. Thank you again for having us.